Hello everyone, and welcome to my plugin tutorial on my plugin Up2Date. This tutorial will cover pretty much everything you need to know about the plugin. I'm going to split it up into 3 different sections. The first one is going to be going over the configuration of the plugin and all the different nodes that are in the config and what they all mean. And then the next one is going to be the setup wizard in-game. So there's a bunch of steps to set up the plugin in-game, and I'll just be going through all of those. And then the last one will be the actual usage of the plugin once you've configured it and set it up in-game, and just how to manage all your plugins and updates. So yeah, without further ado, let's head right into the first one. Right, so this is the config for Up2Date. You'll notice there's really not that much to it right now. It is pretty basic because I just launched the plugin, but most of it is just documentation, so if you get lost, you should be able to just read about it and hopefully figure it out. Some basic pointers, you should probably look at this right here. It explains, so right here I always provide a type, and then sometimes a unit, like minutes for example, and then integer. Int and integer are the same thing. But, so string is just any text. Normally it's surrounded by single quotes or double quotes. Sometimes it doesn't have to be. It's weird. YAML is weird. Just surround it with quotes basically. The next one is int, which is just a raw number without a decimal. So you just type the numbers and put them in there. And then the next one is a float, which is a number with a decimal. So I don't think I have any of those. Yeah, I don't have any of those. But for instance here, that would be 120.5 or something. The next one is a Boolean, which is just a true or false value. Pretty simple. And then array is just a list of values like the one stated above. I don't have any arrays in the config right now, but if I did, it would look something along the lines of this. So if it was a string array, you'd obviously do string 1, string 2, so on, so on. Then if it was ints, you could just do like that. Booleans, you get the point. So yeah, that covers the basics of it. Now let's get into the config notes. So I've split it into a bunch of sections. There's general, messages, advanced, and then the SQL database. So general is what it sounds like. It's general. The first one is the setup complete node. You probably shouldn't touch this. The only time you would really need to touch this is if you messed up somewhere along the setup and it still completed, but you want to do it again for whatever reason. And in that case, you would delete either the table in your database or the plugin data.yml file, and then you would set this back to false, and then you would continue with whatever you're doing. Alright, and go through the setup again. This gets set for you. Once you do the setup in game, it gets set to true automatically, so you really shouldn't have to touch this, but it's there just in case you need to. This next one is the cache refresh delay, which is how often the plugin is going to ping Spigot to check for any updates. 2 hours is pretty short in my opinion. I don't really think you need to be checking for plugins that long. It is in minutes, so 60 minutes, 1 hour. Really don't go below half an hour, I would say. It's just not nice to Spigot to be pinging them that much, and it runs in the background, but it takes a decent amount of time to ping if you have a lot of plugins. So if you make it really short, like 2 minutes, then it could overlap and there could be errors. So just probably keep it over an hour or two, or a day even. Then here we have the messages section now. The first one is the prefix, just pretty self-explanatory. Before any messages that are sent to users, there's the prefix. And then the no permission message is the only one that you can actually customize right now. The other messages are really only sent to administrators, so I don't see a point in you needing to change them, but I figured if you wanted to hide the no permission message to your users or whatever reason, I just put it in there. But there's not really any other things you need to change. Right, so now moving on to the advanced section of the config, we have two nodes here, the thread pool size and the connection pool size. Basically, the thread pool size is how many connections the plugin can have to the internet at any given time. So the higher you set it, the more stress your server will have, but the faster you'll get updated info. So use common sense with this. If you have a weak server, don't set it that high. If you have a strong server, set it higher. Never set it above 12. There's really no need to set it above 12. And then you should also take into account the amount of plugins you have, because it makes it go faster. And if you're gonna go through 70 plugins with checking info for 5 at a time, is gonna take a while. The next one is the connection pool size, which the connection pool is for the database. It's the same thing as the thread pool, just connections. So this really, you shouldn't need to set it above 10, I would say, because it's a database and all you're really transferring is text. Even with 5, it's not going to take that long to transfer data for 40 plugins or something. It's fast, it's just text. So I don't think you would ever need to change this unless you have some absurd amount of plugins, but it's there in case you want to change it. I don't think you'll really see any effects from changing it though. Now moving on to SQL. Obviously this only applies if you're using a database. If you're not, don't worry about it. So SQL, pretty self-explanatory. Enable SQL, the IP and port of your database, the username, password, database you're connecting to, and then the table name you want Up2Date to create. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up the config section. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory, so hopefully that goes pretty well for you. Right, so moving on to the second part of the tutorial, I'll be going over the in-game setup and how all that works. Right now on the server I have Up2Date installed, Protocol Lib, and then about 10 other random plugins that will be updated through Up2Date just to show that it works. But yeah, you can see up in the top right here, I have my console for my server, so you can see everything that goes on. And yeah, I guess I'll just start the server. Right, so it looks like the server has started up, so we'll go ahead and jump right in. Turn off otherboard here. And right when you join, you'll get a little message here saying, thanks for purchasing Up2Date. Notice you haven't done the in-game setup yet. Would you like to begin? Just hit yes, and it will send you the first title. This setup wizard is split up into 3 different steps. You may not have to do some of them, depending on what plugins you already have on your server. But yeah, so the first one is downloading Auto Updater API, and this one is pretty important because Auto Updater API is the heavy lifting for Up2Date, you could say. It is the thing that literally manages downloading and installing updates. So it's pretty important. If you hit no, it'll just kick you out of the setup, but you can't skip this step. So we're just going to go ahead and hit yes to proceed. Let's say it downloads and initializes. You can see the initialization in console. Now the second step is to log into Spigot, and I can understand if you would not want to do this step, which is fine. The plugin will work if you hit no. You just won't be able to update premium plugins, which is why you need to log in. Once you log in, your credentials are encrypted and hidden on your file system, and the only time they ever get sent onto the internet is to log into Spigot as you, to download the premium plugins as you and update them. So it's really your decision. I'm not going to try and force you to give me your credentials. I don't do anything with them except encrypt them and put them onto Spigot to log in. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and log in here. So just type in your username. Right now, when I'm testing, there is a slight issue with the Anvil GUIs, and it just causes a little error to go up in console whenever you type something in. Hopefully by the time you're watching this, I'll have fixed that, but no guarantees. So you hit that to log in with the two-factor. Also, yeah, the two-factor is the last step, and once this finishes, I'll go in and explain a little bit about how you get your two-factor secret. It's not the code on whatever authenticator app or SMS or email you're using. So yeah, I'll go explain that right now before I go into the third step. Okay, so if you have two-factor authentication enabled and you're trying to log into Up2Date, you are going to need to get your two-factor secret key. The way you get this is if you go down to your two-step verification in your Spigot account settings, and you click, if you have it enabled, you're going to have to disable it again, sadly. So if I disable two-step and confirm, then if I enable it again, then you'll see it will show me the QR code right here. It'll also show me the two-factor secret right down there, which is what you will need to copy. So the third and final step of the plugin setup is to have Up2Date go through all of your plugins and try and establish links between the server and Spigot. So what that basically means is I have an algorithm in the plugin that tries to establish those links because that's what it needs. It needs to see that this plugin on Spigot is the same as this plugin on the server, and then it just checks if the version on Spigot is different than the version on the server. If it is, it says there's an update available and updates it. The algorithm tries to compare a bunch of things like the author, the website, all that stuff to see if there's a match between the two, and if there is, it puts it as linked or green in the GUI you'll see in a second. And then if it finds a couple possible results and it's not quite sure, it'll show it as yellow or unlinked. And then if it just has no idea and there's no possible results that it knows of, it'll just put it as red or unknown. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and click yes. Just know that this algorithm does take a little while, depending on how many plugins you have. If you have a lot and you up to the thread pool size in your config, then this will go faster, but it will also be more stressful on your server. So again, up the thread pool sparingly, but if you have a lot of plugins, it will make this go a lot faster. So yeah, we'll just hit proceed. So yeah, there we go, 19.55 seconds to get the info on all 12 of those. It managed to perfectly match 6 of them, which is the linked, and then the yellow or unlinked for 2 of them, and then red or unknown for 4 of them. And 2 of those 4 are bogus, you'll see in a second. So the first one of the red ones is Up2Date, and while I'm making this video, Up2Date isn't on Spigot, so it can't tell it. But once it's released, hopefully it will match it properly. I'll hard code it in so it matches it properly. So we'll just shift delete because it's not on Spigot. And then protocol lib has an external download link, and sadly Up2Date doesn't work with plugins that have external download links because it relies on directly connecting to Spigot to download it, so that doesn't work. So we'll just delete protocol lib, and now we're just left with these. So Featherboard is a bit of a peculiar case because you'll see in a sec once I click on this that how the algorithm works is it finds obviously a bunch of potential candidates and then picks the best out of those. But it doesn't go into that much detail because if it did, Spigot would get mad because the plugin would be pinging them too much. So once you click this, it will go and get the extra detail on the plugin, and then if it finds out that this plugin actually won't work, then it just removes it from the search results. So if it does that for 4 of them, and then 1 of them is left, it will just automatically match that one, which is what you'll see for Featherboard. So we'll go ahead and view the results, and it'll load in, and then there's only that one, and once it loads the results, it'll just set it. So it goes back here, and then you can watch it change in a sec. Ta-da! And it linked it, and author is correct, so is the version, and yeah. So then PAC is Phoenix Anti-Cheat, and you'll see that it did find some results, but it's not the correct ones, because on Spigot it's called Phoenix Anti-Cheat, and in-game it's called PAC, so that kind of messes with the algorithm a bit. So we'll just go back here and right click to enter the ID. Now the plugin ID, I'll go ahead and explain what that is. So the way to find a plugin ID is if you're on the Spigot page for, say, Phoenix Anti-Cheat, like I am right here, you go up to the URL up here, and it'll be these couple of digits right after the name. So you see the name, and then there'll be a dot, and then right here is the 4 digits that you'll need. So you're just going to take the plugin ID, and I have the one copied here, so that, and then just click the paper and wait a little bit while it gets the information, and then ta-da, linked. So we'll just enter the ID for Pulse Health. The reason it didn't get Pulse Health is because on Spigot it's Pulse space Health, and then in game it obviously doesn't have spaces, so it's just Pulse Health. So not a perfect algorithm, but does most of the heavy lifting. Armor stand tools. Yep, and then once you have all of these green, or if you still have some red or yellow remaining, they just won't be saved. So yeah, once you've done that, you can just go ahead and click save. And this will save it to the flat file or the database. It depends on what you set in your config. So yeah, we'll just click save, and that will finish the setup. And now we'll move on to the next part, which is the actual usage of the plugin. Okay, so this is the final section of the tutorial. I'm going to be going over the actual usage of the plugin. This is the main GUI that the plugin uses for you to manage all your updates and stuff. You can get to the GUI by typing /up2date or /u2d. And yeah, so it's pretty self-explanatory. All of the clay blocks at the top are plugins. If they're orange, they have updates available. If they're green, they are up to date. So yeah, you can left click to select and deselect plugins. You can right click to change the ID. If you messed up the ID somewhere, you just go here and enter the ID. And then you can shift left click to update the plugin right now, or shift right click to delete the link. And what that means is Up2Date won't track this plugin anymore, it won't check for updates for it. And it'll go down into this GUI and it won't be displayed here. So yeah, we're going to try out the update now on our preview. So I'll just shift left, give it a sec, there we go. 1.5 seconds, and it's updated. So pretty fast. Yeah, so then down here we have the green button, which updates all the plugins that have updates available. And then to the right of that, we have the yellow button, which messes with your selection. So if you left click, it updates all of the plugins in your selection that have updates available. If you right click, it deletes the link with all of those. And then if you shift or right click, it toggles the entire selection. And if you shift or left click, it just selects everything. If I have these two selected and I shift or right click, it toggles. Whereas if I have those two selected and I shift left click, it just selects everything. And if I shift left click now, nothing, shift right click, there you go. So we're gonna do Title Advanced, Thirst, and Featherboard, and we'll left click to update those. Then we'll hit confirm. Give it a sec here, there we go. So the action bar, it's just giving you a percentage value, but the time frame for this is going to be a bit longer for this specific update because Title Advanced and Featherboard are premium plugins, which typically take a bit longer because I have to go through all the authentication, and Featherboard and Title Advanced are rather large plugins, which is how premium plugins are supposed to be since they have more effort put into them. So it does take a little bit longer, quite a bit longer actually, but still a lot faster than a human could do it. So yeah, there's Title Advanced, Thirst, and Featherboard, now updated. So that took around 30 seconds, I think. And then we have 5 free plugins now, so we'll see how fast the 5 free ones update by using this button without any of them having to require a user login or authentication and stuff like that, just a regular download. Confirm. There's the action bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. And when the action bar fades away, that's because, well, there we go, 5 and 16 seconds, which is like 10 seconds shorter. But when the action bar fades away, it's usually because the initialization of the plugin is taking a little while. If it's a big plugin like Featherboard or Title Advanced, any Maximum VDW plugin, it might take a little while to initialize, but it should eventually get there. And that will lag your server a bit. So if there's player movement, they'll get shot back while it initializes. Just a small side effect of everything. So yeah, that's what those two buttons do. Now we have all of our plugins updated. The next button here views the unlinked plugins. So it just opens a new GUI. And if there are any plugins that are unlinked, it shows them there. Any valid plugins that are unlinked. Then here, you can just refresh the GUI. So when I updated our preview, I did the shift left click and then I manually exited the GUI. If you don't do that, the GUI won't automatically refresh. You just go down here, click it, and it refreshes, and it'll display that properly. And then this blue button right here saves all data to the file for me, or if you have a database set up, it'll save it to the database. The only time you need to save data is if you updated a plugin's ID, or if you unlinked a couple plugins, then you just click and it saves it pretty fast. If it's on a database and you have a ton of plugins, it might be a little bit longer, but if you have a ton of plugins and you've upped the connection pool size in the config, then it should be pretty fast as well. So that just saves all the data. This next one here is to install a plugin. So you just click, enter a plugin name and a plugin ID, and it downloads it. It is kind of intensive. Your server may lag a little bit, just because of the same reason I was saying with the initialization of the plugin. But this one also lags a bit because normally what I do is the requests to download a plugin get put off separately, but when you do this, I just make it download as fast as possible, so that lags your server a bit extra. By the way, the name you type for this when you click it is the plugin name you would see if you did /pl, and caps do matter, so capital F feather, capital B board, capital T thirst, that sort of thing, all caps PAC. If you're downloading directly from Spigot, that name might not be super apparent, so just give it your best guess. If you get it wrong, it will not enable and it'll show up red in the plugins. Then you can just reload or restart your server and it'll be loaded, but it'll still get the jar. So yeah, we'll go ahead and delete Pulse Health. So 13 or no, 11093. So that's the ID, and we'll shift right click, delete the link, and then you can go into unlinked plugins, and then you can right click in unlinked plugins to fully delete it, which will remove the jar, it'll remove the plugin, everything, it'll just be gone. So that, and then we will install plugin, and that was Pulse Health, and then the ID was 11093. And then we'll wait a bit, checking files, and there we go, it's back, and since you already typed in the ID, it automatically links it. So in the config, the cache refresh delay is how often Up2Date automatically checks for updates for all these plugins. But if you just want to check yourself, you can click this pink button, and that will force a refresh and grab all the data for your plugins. And yeah, so I think that's going to finish it for the tutorial on Up2Date. Feel free to go back to any of the sections that you still have questions on. You can find the plugin on Spigot, link in the description. And there's also an issue tracker on GitHub. And then you can PM me on Spigot as well if you have any other questions. So yeah, thanks for watching.